Nera kept her eyes down as she walked through the crowded market. The bright blue markings on her face, marks that should have been a source of pride for a Viridian female, instead made her easy to spot and avoid. "Make way for the empty vessel," someone hissed as she passed. Nera pulled her hood lower, wishing she could disappear. 28 cycles old, and still treated like garbage because she had been born with a rare condition. She could not have babies, and on Viridia, that made her worthless. A group of young females with glowing pregnancy marks stopped talking when they saw her. One of them spat on the ground. "Don't get too close. They say it's catching," the tallest one said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Nera hurried past them, clutching the small package of food she had been allowed to purchase. The market attendant had made her wait until all proper females had been served first. By then, only the bruised fruit remained. She took a shortcut through a narrow alley, heading for her tiny home on the edge of the city. Living on the outskirts was another mark of shame, but at least there she could breathe without feeling everyone's eyes burning into her back. The sound of ships roaring overhead made her look up. Sleek silver vessels, unlike any she had seen before, cut through Viridia's purple sky. The human ships had arrived. Everyone knew war was coming. The Krell Empire had already conquered 3 systems, and Viridia would be next. The Council had fought against accepting help for months, but finally agreed to allow human soldiers to assist in their defense. Nera watched the ships land in the distance. Humans. She had only seen pictures of them in the public archives. They looked almost like Viridians, but with strange, colorless skin and no natural markings. And they had such odd ideas about society. Her communication device buzzed unexpectedly. Nera rarely received messages. Who would want to contact her? She opened the screen and nearly dropped it when she saw the official council seal. Citizen Nera VT 29,841. The message read, "Your presence is required at the welcoming ceremony for the Human Defense Force. Report to the Central Hall at sunrise. Your status as linguist has been temporarily reinstated for this duty." Nera read the message 3 times. Her linguistic skills had been discovered during her early education, before her infertility was diagnosed. She had been removed from the language academy once her condition was known. Why would they need her now? The next morning, Nera stood stiffly at the edge of the grand hall, wearing the plain gray robe that marked her status. The hall filled with high-ranking Viridians in their vibrant ceremonial clothes, their fertility marks prominently displayed. The council leader spoke from a platform. "We welcome our human allies, though we regret the necessity of outside assistance." The double doors opened, and a group of humans in dark uniforms marched in. Nera studied them with curiosity. They were more diverse than she expected, different heights, colors, body types. A tall human with short, dark hair and intense eyes scanned the room. For a moment, his gaze met Nera's. She quickly looked down, as was expected of her status. After speeches and formalities, the council leader announced, "Each human officer will be assigned a Viridian host during their stay." Nera watched as important Viridians were paired with human officers. Then the council second spoke her name. Nera VT 29,841 will serve as liaison to Lieutenant James Connor. A murmur ran through the crowd. Assigning an infertile female to a human officer was clearly meant as an insult. The dark-haired human, Lieutenant Connor, stepped forward. The Viridian official whispered something to him, probably explaining Nera's shameful status. Instead of showing disgust, Lieutenant Connor walked directly to Nera and extended his hand in the human greeting gesture. "Lieutenant James Connor," he said in carefully practiced Viridian, "I look forward to learning about your world." Nera stared at his outstretched hand. No one had willingly touched her in years. Hesitantly, she reached out, feeling the strange warmth of human skin against her own. "I am Nera," she said simply, forgetting to use her full designation in her surprise. "Welcome to Viridia, Lieutenant Connor." She didn't notice the angry stares from across the room. For the first time in many years, Someone had looked at her as if she mattered. "I apologize for the poor accommodations," Nera said as she led Lieutenant Connor through the bustling streets of the capital city. She had been ordered to show him around, but everywhere they went, people stared and whispered. Connor looked at the beautiful crystal towers rising around them. "This seems pretty impressive to me." "I meant," Nera hesitated, "I meant me, as your guide. The council should have given you someone better." Connor stopped walking and turned to face her. "Why would you say that about yourself?" Nera's blue facial markings darkened with embarrassment. She wasn't used to direct questions. "Because I am defective." "Surely they told you." "They mentioned something about status, but humans don't judge people the same way." Connor started walking again. "Where I come from, people are valued for who they are, not for whatever your people care about." As they rounded a corner into the main marketplace, a group of high-status females blocked their path. The leader, a tall Viridian with elaborate fertility marks, looked Nera up and down with disgust. "They let you into the central district now. Standards have truly fallen." She turned to Connor with a practiced smile. "Human, if you require a proper guide, I would be honored to assist you." Connor's expression remained neutral. "I'm already with a guide. Thank you." The female's smile vanished. "You don't understand. This," she waved a hand at Nera, "is not fit company for an honored guest. She cannot fulfill the basic function of our species." Nera kept her eyes on the ground. As was expected, the shame burned through her body like fire. "Where I come from," Connor said calmly, "we don't reduce people to their biological functions." His voice remained polite, but something in his tone made the Viridian female step back. "Nera is my assigned liaison, and I'm satisfied with the arrangement." He gently touched Nera's elbow. "Shall we continue the tour?" Stunned, Nera led him away from the now silent group. No one had ever defended her before. Later, they sat in a quiet garden area where few Viridians went at this hour. Connor had asked for a place to talk privately. "Tell me about your society's obsession with fertility," he said. Nera twisted her hands in her lap. "Viridians believe our only true purpose is to continue our genetic line. Those who cannot are seen as failed beings. And that's why they treat you like that." She nodded. "I was born with a rare genetic variation. When they discovered I couldn't have children, I lost everything. My education, my future position, my family connections. That's..." Connor seemed to search for the right word. "That's cruel." "It's our way," Nera said simply. Connor leaned back on the bench. "Humans used to have similar prejudices, long ago. But we learned better. Family isn't just about who gives birth to who." "What do you mean?" "I was raised by a woman who had no biological connection to me," Connor explained. "My birth parents died in the Eastern Wars. Sarah, my adoptive mother, chose to take me in. She's more my family than anyone who shared my DNA could ever be." Nera stared at him. "Your society allows this, taking children who aren't yours. We don't see it that way. We see it as creating family through choice rather than biology." He smiled. "Some of the strongest families I know have no genetic connection at all." The concept was so foreign to Nera that she struggled to understand. A world where she might not be worthless, where family could be chosen. Their conversation was interrupted by a loud alarm. Connor immediately stood up, his hand moving to the weapon at his side. "What's that?" he asked. "War alert," Nera said, her heart racing. The Krell must be approaching faster than expected. Connor's communication device buzzed. He checked it quickly. "I need to get back to headquarters immediately." As they hurried through the streets, now filled with frightened Viridians rushing to safety shelters, Nera felt strangely calm beside the human soldier. For the first time in years, someone had spoken to her as if she mattered. "Stay close," Connor said as they ran. "Whatever happens, I won't leave you behind." Nera didn't know why, but somehow she believed him. The emergency alarm finally stopped after 3 hours. Nara sat quietly in the corner of the military command center, trying to make herself invisible. Lieutenant Connor had insisted she come with him instead of going to the public shelters where other low-status Viridians would be. Now she watched as human and Viridian officers argued over a large holographic map. "The Krell ships will attack from the northern sector," said Commander Vex, the highest-ranking Viridian military officer. "All our defenses should focus there." Colonel Martinez, the human commander, shook her head. "That's too obvious. The Krell are smarter than that." As they argued, Nara studied the map. The Krell ship movements formed a pattern she recognized from her early studies before they discovered her condition and removed her from advanced education. Her heart beat faster. Should she speak? No one would listen to her anyway. But if she was right. Connor noticed her staring at the map. He walked over and crouched beside her. "What do you see?" he asked quietly. Nara hesitated. "I shouldn't speak in this meeting. If you know something, I want to hear it." She took a deep breath. "The pattern. It's a double feint maneuver. The Krell aren't coming from the north or the east. They'll split their forces and attack from the west, where the defenses are weakest." Connor's eyes widened. "How do you know this?" I used to study ancient battle strategies before." She didn't finish the sentence. Connor immediately stood and walked back to the center of the room. "Colonel, I think we need to consider another possibility." The room fell silent as Connor explained what Nara had seen. Commander Vex laughed harshly. "You're taking strategic advice from an infertile," he scoffed. "This is why bringing humans was a mistake. You have no understanding of who is worthy to speak and who is not." Colonel Martinez looked thoughtful. "Lieutenant, what makes you think this analysis has merit?" Before Connor could answer, a young Viridian officer rushed into the room. "Emergency alert. Krell ships detected approaching from the western quadrant." The room erupted in chaos. Commander Vex shouted orders to redirect forces while Colonel Martinez quickly organized the human response teams. Connor walked back to Nara, his expression serious. "You were right." "How did you know?" Nara looked down. "My genetic variation. The doctors said it caused some parts of my brain to develop differently. I see patterns others don't. And your people threw away this talent because you can't have children." Connor shook his head in disbelief. As the command center emptied, Commander Vex stopped in front of them. "This was a coincidence," he said coldly. "Do not think this changes your status." After he left, Colonel Martinez approached. "Lieutenant Connor, report to Defense Station 3 immediately." She looked at Nara with new interest. "Bring your Viridian companion. We might need her insight again." For the next 2 days, Nara worked alongside Connor, analyzing Krell movement patterns. Each time she predicted an attack correctly, more human officers started to listen to her. The Viridians still kept their distance, but they could no longer completely ignore her contributions. On the 3rd day, as they studied new data together, Connor asked her, "Why didn't you tell anyone about your abilities before?" "I tried when I was younger," she said quietly. "But on Viridia, it doesn't matter what else you can do if you can't fulfill your primary purpose." Connor was silent for a moment. Then he said, "On Earth, we have a saying, the right person in the wrong place can make all the difference in the world." He looked at her intently. "You were never in the wrong place, Nara. You were just in a place that couldn't see your value." A sudden explosion rocked the building, throwing them both to the floor. The lights flickered and went out. "The Krell are inside the perimeter," someone shouted. In the darkness, Connor grabbed Nara's hand. "Stay with me," he said. "Whatever happens, we face it together." And despite the chaos around them, Nara felt something new growing inside her. Not the child her society demanded, but something equally powerful. Hope. Smoke filled the corridors as Connor led Nara through the damaged command center. Emergency lights flashed red, casting strange shadows on the walls. "We need to get to the backup command post," Connor said, his weapon ready. "Can you remember the fastest route?" Nara nodded. Her perfect memory was another side effect of her genetic variation, another gift her people had ignored. "This way," she said, pointing to a narrow passage. They joined a group of human and Viridian soldiers heading to the front lines. The Viridian commander, elite warrior Thex, scowled when he saw Nera. "The defective one has no place in battle," he said to Connor. "She's with me," Connor replied firmly. "And she's the reason we had any warning at all about this attack." Thex didn't argue further, but made sure Nera was placed at the back of their group. They reached a ridge overlooking the western plains. Below them, Krell fighters clashed with Viridian defense forces. The strange, insect-like Krell soldiers moved with terrifying speed. "We need to secure that communication tower," Thex said, pointing to a tall structure in the distance. "Without it, we can't coordinate our forces." The team moved carefully down the hillside. Connor stayed close to Nera, teaching her how to move quietly through the battlefield. "Just stay low and follow me," he whispered. Halfway to the tower, the Krell spotted them. Energy blasts exploded around their position. "Take cover," Thex shouted. They scattered behind rock formations. Connor pulled Nera behind a large boulder as blaster fire hit the ground where they had been standing seconds before. Thex's voice crackled over their communication devices. "We're pinned down. We need to split up and approach from different angles." The team separated into pairs. Connor and Nera were assigned to circle around the south side of the tower. As they moved through the battlefield, Nera noticed something strange about the Krell movements. "They're not random," she whispered to Connor. "They attack in threes. One visible, two hidden." Connor nodded. "So for every Krell we see, there are two more waiting to ambush," she finished. This insight saved their lives 3 times as they made their way to the tower. Each time Nera spotted a lone Krell soldier, they waited for the hidden attackers to reveal themselves before proceeding. They finally reached the base of the tower, breathing hard. Connor checked his communication device. "No signal from the others," he said grimly. From their position, they could see Thex and another Viridian warrior, pinned down by heavy fire about 100 meters away. "We have to help them," Nera said. Connor looked surprised. "They wouldn't do the same for you." "That doesn't matter," she replied. "We need all fighters if we're going to win this battle." Connor studied her face for a moment, then nodded. "You're a better person than most of your people deserve." They worked out a plan. Connor would provide covering fire, while Nera, smaller and faster, would circle around to reach Thex. The plan worked at first. Connor's accurate shooting kept the Krell distracted while Nera moved quickly between cover points. She was almost to Thex's position when a new wave of Krell appeared. "Fall back," Thex shouted to his companion. "Leave the defective one." To Nera's shock, Thex and the other warrior ran, abandoning her in the middle of the battlefield. Krell soldiers closed in. Nera froze, certain she was about to die. Suddenly, blaster fire erupted from behind her. Connor had left his safe position and was running toward her, shooting with deadly accuracy. "Get down," he shouted. Nera dropped to the ground as Connor slid beside her, still firing at the advancing Krell. "You came back for me," she said, amazed. "Always will," he replied, grabbing her hand. "Now run." They sprinted toward the tower as explosions erupted around them. At the last second, they dove through a small maintenance door at the base of the structure. Inside, catching their breath in the darkness, Connor checked Nera for injuries. "You're bleeding," he said, touching a cut on her forehead. "So are you," she replied, noticing a wound on his arm. As Connor bandaged her injury, Nera asked the question that had been burning in her mind. "Why did you come back for me when my own people left me to die?" Connor's eyes met hers in the dim light. "Because where I come from," he said softly, "no one gets left behind. Especially not someone as valuable as you." For the first time in her life, Nera truly believed she might be worth saving. 3 days after the battle at the communication tower, Nera sat in the new command center with a small group of human officers. Though not officially recognized, she had become an important part of their strategy team. "The Krell will attack here next," she said, pointing to a section on the holographic map. "They're following a spiral pattern, tightening around the capital." Colonel Martinez nodded. "Lieutenant Connor, prepare your team to reinforce that sector." "Yes, Mom," Connor replied. As the meeting ended, Commander Vex entered with two high-ranking Viridian officials. They glared at Nera. "This meeting area is for military personnel only," Vex said coldly. "The defective one has no place here." Colonel Martinez stood her ground. "Nera's analysis has saved countless lives." "That is irrelevant," said one of the officials. "She violates our most sacred customs by pretending to have value without fertility." Connor stepped forward, his face tight with anger. "Your sacred customs are costing you the war. Nera has predicted every Krell attack pattern correctly." The Viridian official turned to Colonel Martinez. "Remove her, or we will reconsider our alliance with humans." The room fell silent. Everyone knew that without the alliance, neither humans nor Viridians stood a chance against the Krell. "I'll go," Nera said quietly, standing to leave. She had expected this. Good things never lasted for her. "No," Connor's voice cut through the tension. "This ends now." He walked to the center of the room and faced the Viridian officials directly. "I studied your laws since I arrived," he said, "and I know there's one tradition even you can't ignore." The officials looked confused. Connor turned to Nera. "Nera of Viridia, I claim protection rights for you under human military code and Viridian ancestral law." Gasps filled the room. Nera's heart pounded. She knew what he was doing, invoking an ancient Viridian custom that allowed warriors to claim personal protection over someone, regardless of status. Commander Vex stepped forward. "You cannot use our own traditions against us. She is worthless by our standards." "But not by mine," Connor replied firmly. "And the ancient law says any warrior from any world can claim protection if they are willing to." He hesitated for just a moment. "If they are willing to make the protected person part of their family lineage." One of the officials sputtered. "You would make this defective one your family." "On Earth, we have a saying," Connor said. "Family is who you choose, not just who you're born to." He looked directly at Nera. "I choose her." Nera couldn't breathe. No one had ever chosen her for anything. "This is irregular," the official admitted reluctantly, "but technically within our ancient laws." "Then it's settled," Connor said. "Nera stays, and her advice will be heard." The Viridians left, clearly unhappy but unable to argue against their own sacred traditions. When everyone else had gone, Nera approached Connor hesitantly. "Did you mean it?" she asked. "Or was it just to make them leave me alone?" Connor's expression softened. "Both," he admitted. "I needed to protect you, but—" He took her hand. "I also meant it. Where I come from, family is about loyalty and trust. You've earned both from me." "But in your culture, what does this mean exactly?" she asked, confusion clear on her face. "Are we now what you call married?" Connor smiled gently. "It's something between marriage and adoption in human terms. It means I consider you part of my family now. The details." He squeezed her hand. "We can figure those out later, if you want to." Before Nera could respond, alarm sirens blared again. Their private moment vanished as the base erupted into activity. "Massive Krell fleet detected," someone shouted. "All personnel to battle stations." As they rushed to their positions, Nera realized something had fundamentally changed. For the first time in her life, she belonged somewhere, to someone. Whatever happened next, she was no longer alone. And that made all the difference. The news of Connor's protection claims spread quickly through the base. Some humans understood and supported his decision. Most Viridians were outraged. Nera walked through crowded hallways, feeling the stares. She no longer had to keep her eyes down. Connor's claim had given her a strange new status, but old habits were hard to break. "There she is, the one who tricked the human," someone whispered as she passed. Outside the strategy room, Commander Vex blocked her path. The Council wants to see Lieutenant Connor immediately. Alone. Nera found Connor preparing his team for the upcoming battle. When she told him about the Council's demand, his jaw tightened. "I knew this would happen," he said. "Stay with Colonel Martinez until I return." 2 hours later, Connor still hadn't returned. Nera paced nervously in the human section of the base. "He'll be fine," Colonel Martinez assured her. "Connor knows what he's doing." Finally, Connor walked in, his face grim. "They're transferring me off-planet. They say I've disrupted Viridian social order." "They can't do that," Nera exclaimed. "We need you here." "They can. And they are." Connor ran a hand through his hair. "I leave tomorrow morning." Nera felt her world crumbling again. "What happens to me?" "My protection claim still stands," Connor said firmly. "They can't touch you. But they'll make my life miserable once you're gone," she finished. That night, Nera couldn't sleep. Should she run away? Perhaps she could go with Connor. But where would she fit in a human world? Her thoughts were interrupted by a deafening alarm, different from the usual battle alert. "Warning, biological contaminant detected." The announcement system blared. "All personnel report to medical for immediate screening." Chaos erupted throughout the base. Nera ran to the command center where screens showed panicked Viridians flooding medical facilities across the city. Colonel Martinez was coordinating with human medical teams. "The Krell deployed some kind of biological agent," she explained when she saw Nera. "It's affecting Viridian reproductive systems." Nera felt cold shock. "All Viridians?" "Yes. Early reports show it damages fertility. The Krell found your people's greatest fear and weaponized it." The news hit Nera like a physical blow. The entire Viridian population now faced what she had lived with her whole life: infertility. The very thing that had made her an outcast. Commander Vex rushed in, his usual composure shattered. "The medical centers are overwhelmed. We need help." "Our medical teams are already assisting," Colonel Martinez replied. "It's not enough." For the first time, Vex looked at Nera without disgust. You've lived with this condition. What treatments have you received?" Nera blinked in surprise. "Many different kinds over the years. None could cure me, but some helped manage the symptoms and side effects." "We need that information," Vex said urgently. "Our doctors have never dealt with mass infertility before." A human doctor approached. "If you've been receiving treatments, your blood might contain antibodies that could help us understand this weapon." Nera thought about all the years of pain and rejection. How easy it would be to walk away, to let the Viridians suffer as she had suffered. The door opened and Connor walked in, still in his uniform despite his transfer orders. "Nera," he said softly. "I just heard. What are you going to do?" Everyone watched her, waiting for her decision. The people who had rejected her now needed her help. "I'll do whatever I can," she said finally. "But not because they deserve it. Because it's the right thing to do." Connor smiled with pride. "I knew you'd say that." As they walked to the medical center together, Connor whispered, "I'm not leaving tomorrow. I convinced them to delay my transfer until this crisis is resolved." "How did you manage that?" Nera asked. "I told them something they finally understood. That sometimes the ones society values least turn out to be the ones they need most." Around them, the familiar world of Viridia was changing forever. And somewhere in the chaos, a new possibility was being born. For 5 days, Nera barely slept. She moved between medical centers, sharing everything she knew about living with infertility. Her blood samples helped doctors understand how to fight the Krell bioweapon. "Your genetic variation actually protected you," Dr. Rice, the human medical chief, explained. "The same thing that made you different may save your entire species." Nera could hardly believe how quickly things had changed. Viridians who once refused to look at her now watched her with hope in their eyes. One evening, as she helped in the main medical facility, she noticed a group of young females crying in the corner. They had just received confirmation of their infertility. Without thinking, Nara went to them. "I know what you're feeling," she said gently. "The shame isn't yours to carry." A female with tear-streaked face looked up. "How do you live with it, knowing you'll never create life?" "By creating other things instead," Nara answered. "By finding purpose beyond what others expect." As she comforted them, she realized she was repeating Connor's words, ideas that had once seemed impossible to her. Speaking of Connor, she hadn't seen him since morning. She found Colonel Martinez in the command center, her face grave. "What's wrong?" Nara asked, immediately sensing trouble. Martinez hesitated. Connor's team was ambushed during a medical supply run. The Krell took prisoners. Nara felt like the floor had disappeared beneath her feet. "Is he?" "He's alive," Martinez said quickly. "Our sensors detected human life signs at a Krell forward base. We believe they're holding him and 3 others there." "We have to rescue them," Nara said. Martinez looked pained. "The Viridian Council has denied permission for a rescue mission. They say the risk is too high for only 4 soldiers." Nara couldn't believe it. After everything Connor had done, they would leave him to die. She left the command center with her mind racing. As she walked through the medical ward, she overheard 2 Viridian nurses talking. "The defective one saved my sister," one whispered. "She showed her how to manage the pain when the treatment started. I heard she's the reason we have treatments at all," the other replied. "Yet the council still refuses to help her human." Nara stopped, surprised that others cared about Connor's fate. An idea began to form in her mind. That night, she gathered a small group in her quarters, lower-status Viridians who had benefited from her help, and a few human soldiers who respected Connor. "The official forces won't rescue them," she told them. "But we can." She laid out her plan. Her perfect memory recalled tunnel systems beneath the area where Connor was held, tunnels the elite warriors didn't know about because they never patrolled the worthless outer regions where she had grown up. "It's dangerous," warned Trill, a Viridian nurse whose fertility status had always kept her from advancement. "Yes," Nara agreed. "But Connor risked everything for me when no one else would. I have to try." To her surprise, every person in the room volunteered. They moved at dawn, a strange group of outcasts and rebels. Nara led them through forgotten tunnels, avoiding Krell patrols with her knowledge of their attack patterns. When they reached the base, the humans in their group created a distraction, while Nara and 3 others slipped inside. They found Connor and the other prisoners in a holding cell, injured but alive. Connor's eyes widened with disbelief when he saw Nara. "What are you doing here?" he whispered as she worked to free him. "Same thing you did for me," she replied, refusing to leave you behind. As they escaped, they discovered something unexpected. A Krell command center with maps showing the location of the bioweapon production facility. "This could win the war," one of the human soldiers said as they downloaded the information. They made it back to the Viridian base with all prisoners and the valuable intelligence. Colonel Martinez greeted them with a mixture of relief and amazement. "You did what an entire army couldn't," she told Nara. Looking at the rescued soldiers and the vital information they'd brought back, Nara finally understood what Connor had been telling her all along. Value wasn't something others gave you. It was something you created yourself through your choices and actions. And for the first time in her life, Nara felt truly valuable. 3 months after the rescue mission, Viridia was a changed world. Using the information Nara's team had recovered, the United Human Viridian Forces destroyed the Krell bioweapon facility and pushed back the enemy fleet. The old council had been replaced by a new leadership that included people of all reproductive statuses. Commander Vex now served under a female commander who had been affected by the Krell weapon. Nara walked through the central plaza where, not long ago, she had been forbidden to raise her eyes. Now, people nodded respectfully as she passed. She entered the newly established adoption center, where she had been working since the victory. Inside, Viridian children who had lost their parents in the war play together. Nera, a small boy named Kilks, ran to her, wrapping his arms around her legs. "Hello, little one," she said, smiling. The center had been her idea, a place where orphaned children could find new families, regardless of biological connection, a human concept that was slowly changing Viridian society. As she checked on the children, her communication device buzzed with a message from Connor. "Meeting in 1 hour. Important news." Nera's heart skipped. She knew what the message meant. The human forces were finally leaving Viridia. The war was over. She found Connor at their special place, the quiet garden where they had first truly talked months ago. "It's official," he said when she arrived. "The Earth fleet departs tomorrow." Though she had been expecting this, the news still hit hard. "So soon?" Connor nodded. "But I wanted to talk to you before any public announcements." He took her hands in his. "I have 3 options. I can return to Earth with the others. I can request to stay here as a human ambassador. Or," he paused, "you could come with me to Earth." Nera's breath caught. Leave Viridia. The idea was both terrifying and thrilling. "What would I be on Earth?" she asked. "Would I have a place there?" "With me," Connor said simply. "We could make it official, whatever type of relationship you want. On Earth, there are many kinds of families." Nera thought of all that had happened. 3 months ago, she would have jumped at the chance to leave a world that had only brought her pain. But now she had the adoption center and the children who needed her. "What if there's another option?" she said slowly. "What if we stayed here together, but visited Earth sometimes? The children here need both our world's ideas." Connor's face broke into a smile. Ambassador Connor and his Viridian partner running an interplanetary adoption program. "I like it." That evening, they attended the victory celebration. The new Viridian leader called them forward before the assembled crowd. "Today we honor those who saved our world," she announced. "Not just from the Krell, but from our own blindness." She presented them with matching ceremonial cloaks, one in human military colors, one in Viridian blue. "These individuals have shown us that family is not just about continuing genetic lines. It is about choice, commitment, and love." After the ceremony, Connor led Nera to a quiet corner. From his pocket, he took a small object, a medallion combining human and Viridian symbols. "On Earth, we sometimes exchange tokens when we form a family," he explained. "This is for you, whatever you decide." Nera took the medallion, feeling its weight in her palm. "I've already decided," she said. "My place is with you, helping children who need us, whether here or on Earth. That's my purpose now." Connor placed the medallion around her neck. "Once you were shamed for not being able to create life. Now you're honored for creating something different, a new way forward." As they looked out at the celebration, Nera saw Viridian couples with adopted children, fertile and infertile people working together, humans and Viridians sharing stories and laughter. "It won't be easy," she said. "Changing an entire culture takes time." "All important things do," Connor replied. "But we have time now, thanks to you." Nera touched the medallion at her throat. Once she had been defined by what she couldn't do. Now she would be known for what she had done, and what she would yet do. With Connor beside her, the future stretched out bright with possibility. Not the future her world had once demanded of her, but something far better. Something she had chosen for herself.